So, thank you for joining us. This is our first ever podcast in this studio. We're going to call it Just Local. We think it's useful calling it that because really we want to put a bit of a focus on people in and around Worcestershire. I'm joined by a special guest today, someone who I know very well. And before I introduce you to James Gwynne from our Lettings department at Nicol Co Estate Agents, I just want to kind of tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start this with every guest answering one question for me. We'll also close with a question. So we will get underway. And James Gwynne, I'm going to ask you a few questions for you to explain a little bit more about yourself. But as a local, what's your favourite part about living and working in Worcestershire?
It's a good question. And without going into too much of a backstory, as a kid, I wasn't sure about Worcester. I grew up in Worcester, and I was sort of always of this view of, there's not much here, it's a bit boring, all that sort of thing. As I've got older and I've had a family and I've had kids, I've just realised how safe it is, how comfortable it is, everything's in touching distance, and Worcester's also grown as well. Worcestershire on the whole has grown, and now working in the business that I'm in, the industry I'm in, and seeing potential developments that are going on as well, it's actually very, very exciting. So that's what I love about Worcestershire the most at the moment.
Super duper. Right then, let's let everyone know a little bit more about you. So can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and your role as Lettings Manager at Nicol Co?
Yeah, so Lettings Manager, I've been in the lettings business for about 12 years, 13 years almost. In that time, I've worked across different disciplines within the lettings role, property management, upfront lettings, and managed teams. Ended up at Nicol Co in 2022, having worked in Hereford before that. Just got a sort of it's always been my sort of instinctive go-to role as I've sort of moved in my career. So I manage the lettings team. We're a team of 4. We've got at the moment around 270 properties under management, where we are involved with both the upfront letting and then the day-to-day maintenance and repair of those properties, regular inspections and all the things that go with that. And that's across Worcestershire, Worcester, Droitwich, Malvern as the key areas that we operate in.
Great, yeah. And what inspired you to pursue a career in property management and lettings? Because you're a bit of a musician as well, aren't you, in the background?
So I got together quite young with my wife, my now wife. So we went to school together, and then after school, we didn't speak for a few years. We went to different colleges and stuff. Funny enough, all in Worcester, sixth form and tech college, and I was very interested in music at the time, and I was pursuing, I'd say not a career in music, but I took it pretty seriously. And I was working part-time at the co-op, and I when I finished school, I hadn't really at the time aspired to huge amounts. Music was my interest, but I got in a relationship with my wife pretty quickly at age 18, and we both decided we were quite serious, and we wanted to do something with our lives. And I've got to be honest, I fell into lettings because I needed a stable career.
Yeah. So
I took on an apprenticeship at age 19. I've not looked back since. I didn't really know what I was getting into. It was Ludlow Thompson. They're a lettings business based in London. I think they've actually now been bought by Foxtons, but a lettings business based in London. They had a property management centre in Warner Villages in Worcester. I operated out there and learned the trade there very quickly. But at the time, I wouldn't say I really knew what I was getting into.
No.
Just seems silly.
And not to give away your age, how many years is that then you joined at 19, and how long have you been into lettings? And
so it's about 12 and a half years.
Yeah, got you. And how's your experience in the property industry shaped your approach to managing a portfolio? So how's it been affected?
An awful lot. Funnily enough, I was just on the phone with someone this morning that was in a very difficult position with their individual circumstances. They'd been made homeless. They were having trouble with securing another property because of basically trying to secure what's available to the market. So the biggest thing that sort of both shocked me and inspired me really has been this issue that we've talked lots about of not having enough available housing.
Yeah.
And it continued, like sort of my sort of constant study of that and desire to find out more about solutions to that problem has has been sparking me on the most, really.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I can kind of say hand on heart when we've seen you on landlord seminars. You're trying to appeal to landlords' good nature, that investing in property is obviously going to be profitable for them over time and it's going to have value increase and those bits and pieces. But actually, there's almost that kind of, we need to give these people places to stay.
Yeah.
So if it's affordable and it's an opportunity to do that, it does really come across. So yeah, fair play to you. So the reason I got James on as our first guest is not because I thought he'd smash it, but also because we wanted to talk about something that he's been up to. So busy father, busy lettings manager, got a lot going on. He still found time to write his own book, and it's now published. It's available to purchase, which we'll share links with you in bits and pieces. But he's managed to produce a book called Home, and I feel like I've been on the journey on the sidelines with this one, watching you work hard at this and coming up with edits for you in bits and pieces. So, James, we want to talk about your book today. Let's start with what's motivated you to write the book. Who's your target audience?
So target audience obviously is landlords. It's called Home. It's the ultimate guide for landlords. And yeah, the idea behind that was that I've always wanted to write a book. I've always found myself creative in that way. And after finishing what I was doing with music, I wanted to continue to do something creative along the side of my usual day-to-day work. And for a long time, I didn't know what that was. And I found odd little bits and pieces of writing here and there that I was doing. And then something clicked, and it all happened around the same time I started at Nicol Co, when I looked at the way in which I manage my time a little bit differently, coming from a job where I was commuting regularly before and generally working heavier hours. And I thought, right, okay, so I've got to, I can manage this and I can put all of these pieces together here. And I thought, instead of actually focusing on completely separate creative writing or a complete creative project, actually, why not focus within what I already know really, really well? Mm-hmm. So the inspiration was, well, actually, I know this stuff like the back of my hand, and I Googled books for landlords and found nothing really that was. There's a couple of pre-made books, but there's nothing that is sort of specific to now, what's going on at the moment, and just thought it was an opportunity.
Fantastic. And having read it a few times, because I was at the early stage reading it for checking and now I'm reading it to enjoy it, it is a very thorough book. So can you give us an overview, the key themes and the advice covered in this book? Not giving it all away, obviously, but just a few of the ideas.
Yeah, so it's called Home. The reason it's called Home is because it's an acronym that we've broken down into H for homework, O for obtain, M for manage, and E for evaluate. So one of the key things that I've sort of, if you think about a landlord's journey, they are 4 key principles that they will do along the way, regardless of the political landscape, the legislative ups and downs that go along. Those 4 things, in one way, shape, or form, will form part of their ongoing investment plan. Mm-hmm. And it often will end up in a cycle where they'll find that they'll come back to those key principles regularly. So I've broken the book down into those key principles and then highlighted the intricacies within it. So homework, looking at the pre-planning process, in terms of what your potential rental yield's going to be, where and what to buy, those sorts of things. Obtain, actually, the conversations with agents, determining the process of purchasing and how that goes and when to expect to be able to complete in that chain, and then management, looking at securing a tenant, moving them in, managing the property, mm-hmm. With an agent, without an agent, however which way you decide to do it, and then evaluate the opportunity to review your portfolio, figure out whether you've got equity to either buy more or whatever you might want to do with the investment from there. So.
And you mentioned earlier there weren't many resources, but what do you think sets this book apart from other resources that might be out there? Because this isn't Worcestershire specific, is it? This is a landlord up north could use it. Down south, it's got
it's UK wide. And I think the thing is one of the reasons that there aren't many is because I think it's hard to create something that will stand the test of time, for the very reason that legislation changes so quickly. Yeah. So I know that there are elements of this book that could be out of date within a year, because we've now got a Labour government. We've got a situation where they're likely to introduce changes to Section 21 notices. Everybody's expecting them, but it's very difficult to refer to them when you're writing a book. But there's always going to be that constant movement. So my view is that the difference, the point of difference is the principles, because regardless of whether legislation changes, the principles remain.
And ultimately, landlords don't sell their property the minute government changes. They hold on to them, so they need to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
And obviously, with the support of a good lettings agent,
Yeah.
they can work their way through the legislation changes significantly. So, so the book, as I mentioned, called Home: The Ultimate Guide for Landlords. It is available on Amazon. We'll make sure you get a link so that you are able to access it. We'll put it in the show notes. I've heard people say that before. So if you'd like to download a copy of that to your Kindle, or if you'd like to buy a copy on Amazon, there'll be a link available for you to do that. And James, I must say, I'm very impressed with it. I hope there's another one waiting in the wings. Are you inspired now to do more? Or?
I've got to be honest, I've got some ideas, but I don't know where they're going to take me yet. So.
Okay, all right, we'll wait and see on that one. Yeah. Let's talk about the market. So we're filming this in September. Kids are about to go back to school. Just thought I'd put time on it in case someone watches this in 2025. But what are the biggest challenges landlord face today? And again, going back to your book, what do you think is in the book that might help them?
Yeah, so it's preempting what could come is the main thing. So we've now got a new government. We've got the Labour government now in power. They've already made announcements of plans to introduce a bill which they're calling the Renters' Rights Bill, which is supposed to be very similar to the Tory Planned Renters Reform Bill. So it's looking at Section 21 notices, how do they work in practice. It's looking at, is the current form of a tenancy fit for purpose. So it's potentially quite a big overhaul. The thing is for landlords is that we don't know what that's going to look like for them until at least sort of 3-4 months away when we have the autumn statement. So I suppose the challenge for landlords at the moment is confidence. And keeping landlords confident that the market, regardless of that situation, it's still a good time to consider an investment. But the truth be told is that we're in a position where rental yields are the highest they've ever been because the demand is so high. So just going back to what we were saying earlier, we had the month of June, we saw 50 applicants for one property as an advertised, from sort of applicants coming through Rightmove to us. So it gives landlords the opportunity that if they are investing for the long term and they've got reasonable capital, so they're not mortgaging to the hilt to make it work, then regardless of those legislation changes, it's a good long-term investment because the rental yield will pay off.
Yeah, and those numbers you just mentioned there, so just to put that into context, in June you had 12 properties listed, 600 inquiries. So we had a team that had to deal with 600 inquiries for one thing, but that was for 12 properties. So you average that out, it's 50 inquiries for each property. And then in July, getting close to the summer months, we had 35 inquiries for every property listed. So it really is a real problem out there, isn't it, in terms of available stock, which is potentially great for landlords. Obviously, it means that there's a good market. And they won't have a property empty for long. There won't be any void periods if they price it right. So current trends for residential property market in Worcestershire, what you kind of see at the moment, is that going to continue? Is it much the same or?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think that as far as at least the lettings market is concerned, the good news is that we're seeing more sort of different stock coming to the market. So we've just recently been involved with the letting management of 2 sort of build to rent sites, which are a first in Worcester. We're expecting some more through the pipeline coming very soon, which I think could inject some positivity into the rental market locally. Until now, the rental market in particular has been made up of 2 to 3 bedroom houses, Warner Villages, St Peter's, Arboretum. They're very, very similar properties and everybody's competing over the same sort of thing. And these kind of new spec, low, sort of high energy efficiency buildings, the more that we get of those and we can move some tenants into, if you like, some premium rents that can afford those sorts of rents, the more it might allow for those properties to become a little bit more available for people. So I'm thinking actually I'll have a positive sort of competitive, it will help the competition. Yeah,
good news coming ahead then. And what do you think in terms of economic changes and different governments and stuff like that? Do you think a Labour government's going to cause any major problems for tenants or anything positive in there? I know it's risky to go political, but what do you think?
I'm not scared of a Labour government. I think that there's a lot of landlords out there, and I see it on social media and I see it when I talk to people. There's a lot of landlords that are concerned about things that are coming down the line with these potential changes. And I think that where every government has been short-sighted is of this issue of housing, in that there is this sort of consistent punishment, if you like, of landlords for tenants not being having suitable housing or having enough housing, or at least that's the way they politically sort of make it out to be. But actually they're not sort of hitting the root cause, and this goes for Labour and the Tories, which is that if you go a little bit deeper than that, you've got a letting agent that has to make sure that they provide the landlord with a suitable reference report to say that that tenant has met criteria. If they don't do that, they're then liable if the rent doesn't get paid, because they basically move somebody in on false pretenses that they're not really suitable for the property. Yeah. So they've not met recommendations. But those reference reports aren't set by the letting agent, they're set by an insurance policy. So actually a lot of the time, a lot of these things, so the government are consistently coming back to landlords, and I think the message that is really important to me is actually what the government needs to look at is FCA regulations and a number of things surrounding that, in addition to building housing, which needs to happen. Yeah. But actually, what are insurance policies doing about their criteria for referencing? And that's a big thing for me at the moment if we're looking at the political landscape.
Oh, I asked a good question then to get you going. Right, whilst I've got you on this kind of mode, then stamp duty to landlords.
Yeah,
I have my opinion on it. What's your thoughts? And
I think that in certain areas I can see its relevance. I think that every time I go to St Ives, which is a lovely place to go, you go there and it is just full of holiday lets, and I can imagine that for locals it's very, very difficult. In Worcester it's a completely different kettle of fish,
yeah. and unfortunately it stops a lot of landlords from getting in the market, isn't it, as well, which is causing the problem, which means that there's a shortage of stock, and then therefore the rents obviously increase because there's demand for it. So it's a backwards way of looking at things, unfortunately. I think the increased stamp duty needs to be looked at. So if you're watching, that needs to happen in the autumn statement. How important is it for landlords to stay informed about legislative changes? Very easy for someone else to say. And what are the risks if they don't?
Yeah, well, very important. And that depends on service level. If you're having an agent manage it, there's less of a requirement to, because you can A, expect your agent to inform you, and B, if they haven't informed you, you can at least expect them to know what's coming, so you'd be able to, you've got some backing to be able to tackle that. Not only of the legislative requirements, I suppose, but also the practical issues that goes with managing your property. If you're not doing it with a letting agent, being astute to those things are really, really important. It's really silly little things that are easy to overlook. So when you move a tenant into the property, you legally have to make sure that you've given them the gas certificate, the electrical certificate, the energy performance certificate, a printout of a government how to rent guide, and their deposit prescribed information. And if you don't physically give them to them and you don't have evidence that you've given it to them, so getting them to sign to say, I've had that information, then you can't serve a Section 21 notice. So it invalidates that. And if you were to try to serve one, you to try to take it to court, your court case would be thrown out. So it is really, really sensitive.
Big implications if they don't get it right.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't know, use an agent who does know, or learn.
Super. Just heading back to your book for a moment, can you share any kind of specific chapters or sections in the book that you think might be particularly important for that, or just for landlords in general to read? If they couldn't read the whole thing, where do you think they need to definitely have a look?
Yeah, so there's a whole section on property management, which I think covers those sort of important points. The opening to the book covers the sort of section on the housing situation that we're in, and talks about the sort of the applicant to let ratio and those sorts of bits and pieces. The practical sort of maintenance and repair, the negotiating a let element is sort of halfway through the book on the management section.
Super. And this book isn't just for what we call accidental landlords who have become a landlord not through choice necessarily, or even portfolio. It's for every type of landlord. Is that right? Is that what it's aimed at?
That's the aim. Yeah, definitely. I think it covers all bases.
And we're going to come to a close in a moment, because I want to keep this short and punchy, because I want to make sure people get a lot of value from it and they can move on with their day. What was the most challenging part about writing a book? Because I haven't done one, so you can tell a lot of people out there. And how did you overcome it as well? If it was challenging, how did you overcome it?
The book was kind of written in stages, and it started out as something small, sort of a framework. So I wrote intro through to, okay, this is how I want the book roughly laid out. If I think about the landlord and tenant journey, what does it generally look like? And I wrote out a framework, and then I gradually went through chapter by chapter, but I had to do the chapters when I felt like doing them. Okay. I couldn't just go, right, I said I'm going to write about property management, and property management in particular was the heaviest thing for me to do, because it had obviously the detail, and because I'd spent all day doing it, I'd get home, and the last thing I'd want to do was sit and write about it.
Of course, yeah.
So there were certainly parts of the book that were more exciting than others, and I basically just procrastinated on those points and filled in other points as I went along. And then equally, the other difficulty where I had your help and Dave Darcher's help as well, actually, with the creation of the cover, getting it set up on Amazon with the formatting. Like I'd written a manuscript, great, and then I realised it had to be in a certain framework, and that was very, very difficult to do. And equally with the ebook, it's been the same.
Has it?
But yeah.
But it's there now, so if you do want to download it, you are welcome to on Kindle, and if you'd like to buy it, welcome to on Amazon. One closing question, and this will be the theme of this Just Local podcast as well. If you could give one piece of advice to anyone looking to get involved in lettings and property management, what would it be?
So for me, it would be, don't ever take a situation as being closed and dealt with. There's always something else that could be on the horizon that you're not expecting to happen. So always keep an open mind. That would be the important thing for me. With anything that you're dealing with, be it a maintenance or repair, be it a new let, you never know. You're dealing with people all the time, and that can be fun. It can be very exciting, but it can also be quite stressful. And you just got to keep an open mind on what to expect.
Okay, super. James, thank you for attending the very first ever Just Local podcast.
Yeah, it's been brilliant.
And really do think you've done a smashing job with your book. Definitely worth the read. And I look forward to the next one when that comes out as well, and we'll have you back on the show. Thanks, James.
Thank you.